Zach here from Gravel Bike California. I can't believe I'm saying this. Getting ready to do the Rock Cobbler. Now, I've had a lot of questions surrounding this event, like who's my next of kin? What's my blood type? If this is a typical Rock Cobbler, we're going to see a lot of hijinks and antics, a plethora of mechanicals, with a lot of smiles at the very end. Hopefully I'll be part of that. Let's roll. With hundreds now lucky enough to snag an entry, Sam Ames started the Rock Cobbler in 2014. And while prior images don't instill confidence, you will enjoy the method to this madness.
The Cobbler is all about the riders, the challenge of the day. So yeah, having some breakfast, some coffee, they'll have a good time, but it's going to be a big challenge.
Probably pace yourself on this ride. Like, there's a lot of climbing. I was looking at the course last night and it's like, I mean, according to Strava, it's like 10,000 feet. I know there's that massive climb in the middle. That looks pretty hard. So yeah, definitely don't go out too hard.
The race starts out as 7 miles on the bike path, and then you're getting onto some pretty easy gravel.
I like to call them puckering moments. So the wildflowers are kind of going crazy once they get out in the private land stuff. So it's going to be beautiful, but there's some interesting features of drop-ins and canyons and sand and stuff that really will get people's attention. And then of course the hike-a-bike. So yeah, there's some good challenges out there.
Getting an overview of the course, the route starts out of the Kern County Museum, holding a number of buildings and artifacts dating over a century old. The start makes a beeline along the Kern River, where you can pound out the flat first 8 miles quickly on pavement. Your entry onto dirt features 2 big climbs and descents where the antics are only getting started. The next 14 miles are mostly off-road rollers along the foothills with your first non-pit stop along the way. The toughest climb of the day hits you at the halfway point, where most of these 3 miles hits a grade in the double digits. Whether it's mostly paved or downhill, the next 10 miles provide a quite needed reprieve. The next 15 miles are a good transition of mixed surfaces with short punchy climbs that'll pass quickly. Your Kodak moment comes up at mile 71, meeting your worst hike-a-bike so far, followed by a second effort that's even worser. If you survive, you face the funnest part of the day near the start of this 5-mile dirt sector, but don't joke around about the climbs being over. Returning via the bike path, the final numbers come out to 84 miles with a blip over 8,000 feet of climbing. Even this early, spirits were high, as of course Cobbler was served, giving you last-second sustenance, as you could tell the venue was well prepped for the postgame. With everyone eager for this 8 a.m. start, Sam gave out final instructions as the pro men mixed in with the first wave, the pro women assembled in the second, while the alphabetically challenged like me
Make it happen.
were placed in the third. Turning onto the Kern River Bike Trail, it's good to knock down the first 4.5 miles at over 20 miles per hour. You just have to be sure to hang on. Hitting the streets kept the pace high. And while you enjoy the comfort of the pack, you realize from the environs you might get more shade from the derricks than the trees out here. Just as you start adoring these green hills, you go off-road to attack them. As it's documented, be prepared to fight like salmon swimming upstream. Flirting with double-digit grades help thin the pack, both physically and mechanically. as the climb dipped back into spinning, where you take in the views of all this verdant carpeting, setting the tone for a great start. The downhill also previews the better than expected conditions, and even a mandatory dismount is more of a bonding opportunity with the group. Call it foreshadowing with the livestock above, but the conga line down the single track initiated the most eventful descent of the day. Now, if I was just talking about crashing, that would have been enough. And while this section should have promised some flowy fun, there was an impediment in front of us, which I'm sure you've heard about unless you live under a cobbled rock. I was comfortable staying back until the proper time came.
No matadors.
As the opportunity to pass was limited. Yet others still took a flyer, and while I could have seeked internet fame, I chose to let it tire before I passed. These transgressions overshadowed what a fun descent this was, as the only other thing you had to worry about was running over cow pies. The first of many well-stocked pit stops came up, leading us into our second climb, which was similar in numbers to the first. It was different, with a number of dips and springtime flora abound, not to mention the layout here of the roads was remarkable, with riders scaling the ridgelines down into the valleys below. And while you appreciated every peak you reached, each pitch felt like a setup for some payoff roller coaster style. The descent ended on a high note, trying to figure out this orangeness in front, and getting closer only made me relive childhood memories of shag carpeting. Exiting out of the ranch onto some choppy washboard, unfortunately claimed a tire of our friend. It was good to ride something smooth again, even if it was only 2.5 miles. And the climbing part wasn't bad either. But reaching the top, it may not be on your cue sheet, but for the chance to win $500, do you think I'm not going for this tire toss? Maybe my effort said otherwise. The heat was definitely bacon, as avoiding to slide down, we started our most technical 2 miles with some nominal hike-a-bike and some boulder avoidance on single track as we edged the Kern River, but even the tamer parts had its casualties. If you can ignore the bees, the next 4 miles chime off quickly, especially if you're a big fan of agricultural practices, as these calm rollers led into our next pit stop, where I'd reunite with my GBC crew.
Update.
Haven't crashed.
Uh-huh.
Almost crashed twice. Came unstuck. Put out. Ah! Saved it.
In other words, you want to crash. Come on.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to crash.
With a brief bit of road taking us across the Kern River and the shorter distance turnoff by the Grizzly Cycles pit stop, the next 8 miles of dirt was a tale of two stories. As the first half had it all, including your choice of ill-timed mechanicals, a nice little warm-up hill, descending that's both smooth and not smooth. And why not some hike-a-bike? The second half is just climbing. Glass half full, it was really pretty. And maybe I could barter for a motorcycle. But any reality you have about biking up all these hills will be crushed. And when you do climb, it isn't easy. And you even dread the short downhill in the middle, because when you do the math that this climb averages 8%, you know this dip is working against those numbers. At least the scenery is a worthy distraction, and it is more biking than hiking. But pick your spots.
Save your energy. Fight another battle.
Because this always awaits. With one more big effort left, I finally hit the top. Eager now to take a break from this dirt, but not like how cycling legend Tinker Wars was doing it. As the next 10 miles mainly returned all the elevation you gained, and even the pair of half-mile climbs felt like speed bumps at this point. Riders started coming back together, as it was a magical ride, but took in another pit stop because
Only 33 miles left. Cakewalk!
riding with Steve from San Mateo and Nico from Rafa Santa Monica, it's a smart move to join others from here on out, because there's still distance to hammer in the suburbs of the suburbs, which is relatively flat. But if there's a short climb nearby, Sam somehow seems to find them. Because you wouldn't want to go home feeling shortchanged on elevation. It's not to say Sam is evil, because there's a lot of fun built in, and I've never ridden a better mark course before. And you'll find, like Alejandro, a number of people showing up to hand out water because they love this event just as much. A little jaunt over the roads brought us back onto dirt as we entered the parklands, back along the Kern River, where we wish we had this flowy fun the rest of the ride out. Passing the campground was more foreshadowing, as going through the tunnel really did make you feel like you were heading towards the light, because what you see on the other end should encourage you to take part in activities that also don't make forward progress. There's definitely insanity in the situation which you submit to. But telling your friends you signed up to push your bike up big hills is not going to win you cognition points. But reaching the top of this hike-a-bike isn't even where the craziness has peaked. Normally, this single track would be nutty in its own right. But clearly, the worst is yet to come.
What would you guess the grade is on this?
I want to say 25.
Oh, I'd say way more.
More.
While Ride with GPS says the grade maxes out in the high teens, I think it's closer to what the Kern County Maps tells us, where you're at 38% for almost the length of a football field. You literally take this one step at a time. But there's extra motivation to get to the top because you know who to hold accountable. But you're thankful at the apex that the pit stop was placed here and not below having to carry extra water. With just a dozen miles left, there's still a lot of pomp and circumstance. And while I figured we had to trend downward, hopefully in the near future, There was no warning that it was going to be this much fun, especially when entering Toads, as this sign first made me trepidatious, but this was a roller coaster I'd buy a day pass for. The tank may be empty to accept more climbing.
It's all downhill from here.
Someone just said that 5 minutes ago. Okay?
The downs only lead to more ups. And I'll be damned if I'm gonna take another hike-a-bike sitting down.
Ah, so close.
But I forgot you have to sit down to climb this. Maybe the descent was fun, but I was just focused to saying goodbye to this phase of dirt, as getting on Highway 178 meant faster progress home, even with a little climb. But of course, never get used to your comfort level, as this detour reared its ugly head just to send you into a watery ball pit. On the upside, my Christmas card list just got shorter. Appreciating the last few miles were familiar. Forging a pace line wasn't a plan, but anything to get back the sooner, the better, as we all returned different people as before.
Long day in the saddle. Got cobbled.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. This is not an easy ride. I've done several hard rides. This is in the top 5 hardest rides I've done. It was pretty demoralising when you hit that final hiker bike, and I thought, okay, we're done here. And it's like, oh no, it goes on further. So, Sam, if you're watching, you're a mongrel, okay?
No matter when you cross that finish line, there was plenty of hot food and other things I like, as it's easy to share the joy with others of putting a cobbler in the books.
So the scariness of the hype worked. Sure, it was a tough ride, but nowhere as bad as what social media portrayed. At the same time, if you didn't hear Sam's voice laughing in your head, you didn't really cobble. It was a great time, and I'll be back next year. If you want to find more gravel guides, please go ahead and subscribe to our page or support us on Patreon so we can bring you more. And stay to dirt.